You guys, these two Christmas episodes are great, and what I mean by great, above 8 out of 10 greatness. But at the same time, there was only one Christmas episode that is superior over the other. Levin Lounge, a Leapin, and a very Casagrandes Christmas are perfect examples that they have different plots. They don't have similarities aside from the season of Christmas. And yet at the same time, I really felt like that both of these episodes do a really good job to centering around family during the season of the holidays. Even more than the loudest Thanksgiving episode. Granted, the execution in the Thanksgiving episode is completely different, if you know what I mean, but at the same time, these two Christmas episodes are mostly about family for the right reasons. Granted, in the Loud House episodes, the sisters are struggling with their own issues, mainly Lori preventing herself from opening any presents, Luna trying to come up with a great Christmas song, and Luann trying to do the 12 puns of Christmas, which, for me personally, it's basically her thing, and she pretty much has the easiest goal out of all the sisters in this episode. I will go on with the other characters, but to be honest, we would be here much longer. When it comes to the Casagrandes Christmas episode, the neighbors in the apartment keep heading into the Casagrandes apartment because the Christmas plans of moving to a different location, among others, were cancelled. And I gotta be honest with you, the fact that the Casagrandes is the only family in this episode that has a perfect Christmas and everyone is getting in the way is honestly a struggle. But since that this episode is in the perspective of the Casagrandes who are Mexican while the neighbors are represented in other countries who have different plans, it's honestly a good idea to have these characters gather up in a Christmas episode because of the fact that there are so many different ways to celebrate Christmas, but due to plans being cancelled, they really have no other choice but to go to that one family that had the best Christmas right now. And considering that it never happened to them in previous years where the plans got scrapped, you will probably do the same thing. Granted, it got in the way of Ryan's plans, not to mention that her father was getting the requested food for the Christmas celebration. But to be real with you, it really feels like that it's a makeup of what has to come towards the end of this episode. But we're gonna get to that later. Let's get back to the Loud House episode. Since that Mr. Grouse is those types of characters during the Christmas season that gives bad luck to anyone, even though that they didn't mean to do it for the sake of laying out his aggression, is honestly justified. Granted, he does that even during the other months, but whenever I see it, especially when it comes to how he kept so many things from anyone, really gave me the indication that he just wants to let out his aggression for the sake of laying out his aggression. Especially that he misses his family and he won't be able to see his family on Christmas because he can't be able to afford a bus ticket. I have to be honest with you, whenever I say that he's just unleashing his aggression, it's mainly him just trying to feel good about himself because his family isn't around him and he has no other option to get to his family during the Christmas season. Yes, I'm fully aware that he's always like this even outside of Christmas, but to be honest, without this episode, there would have been an episode, well, it wouldn't have the same impact since it won't be able to have the Christmas season's elements into it. And I honestly felt like that Christmas centering around family in these episodes is a perfect decision, considering that if we did have an episode involving the Loud House that didn't involve family, then I gotta be honest, it would be a difficult Christmas episode to be taken seriously involving the Loud characters. Granted, it could have been written in different ways when it comes to the relationships, but still. Getting back to the Casagrandes, I felt like that their methods into giving the neighbors the vacation that they deserve is honestly a lot more unique, considering that if the Loud siblings did this type of stunts, then I'm pretty sure that they will resolve Mr. Grouse's issues a lot more simpler. But to be real with you, you can instantly tell that the families in the Casagrandes are a lot more different than Mr. Grouse and his family, considering that Mr. Grouse barely sees his family a lot. And even if I'm going to give the Casagrandes episode the benefit of the doubt, there isn't a single character who acts like Mr. Grouse. To be real with you, if we actually had that type of character in the Casagrandes, then this would have been a lot more similar to the Loud House episode. And if the Casagrandes Christmas plot was way more similar to 11 Loud's Leapin, then I'm pretty sure that having a character similar to Mr. Grouse in the Casagrandes show won't be able to work. It just doesn't, especially when you take the consideration that nearly every single character in the Casagrandes is really nice. Granted, the Loud siblings were nice in this episode, despite doing their own goals, but for me personally, it really feels like that the family in Royal Woods, along with other characters, aren't the same as the characters in Great Lake City. Granted, I'm fully aware that not every single character is nice at Great Lake City, but since I'm remembering the city itself, it really gave me an understanding of the world building compared to Royal Woods. Besides, it's actually impressive that this episode, the Casagrandes, managed to showcase so many characters for any fan who enjoys the Casagrandes. And while I understand that these characters, mainly the background characters, don't have the same likability as the Loud House background characters or secondary characters or whatever you prefer, I honestly felt like that they're harmless in episodes like these. To give this episode credit, it really feels like it's mostly trying to give it its all when it comes to the secondary characters, and regardless if you do not like all of them, it's not like that these characters are mostly a nuisance. I mean, they can be annoying at times, but when it comes to episodes like this, like I've mentioned before, they're not annoying. In fact, they really bring out the spirit of Christmas in this episode. As for the Loud House episode, Lincoln may be carrying the entire episode by himself until the very end. That doesn't mean that the whole family aspect is completely erased. In fact, it really shows that if he didn't sneak into Mr. Grouse's house, he would never figure out that he was alone and he had no other option but to stay home because he doesn't have a bus ticket. If it wasn't for Lincoln, I can guarantee you that Mr. Grouse would have been the only saddest person on Christmas. To be real with you, even if he didn't want any recognition from anyone, it probably gave me the impression that he never felt happiness involving family up until the end of Christmas Eve. And since that this led to a song sung by the Loud family along with Clyde's family, it's honestly a really great way to celebrate Christmas with Mr. Grouse. If anything, it really shows that this is one of the best episodes from the Loud House, even to this day, especially after 6 years. Not to mention that this is the first time we get to see Lindsay and Rita's face for the first time. If you did watch the series from the beginning and did not spoil yourself from the seasons afterwards. If you ask me, the relationship of Ryan and his father is a lot more interesting the more I give it credit for, because I've always realized that due to the divorce of Ryan's parents, things just haven't been the same completely when it comes to the Casagrandes. I mean, granted, they're all together as a family, but when it comes to a mother and father relationship that this show had been showcasing quite a bit, which I might talk about if I'm ever going to do that Romance Waking episode next year. Maria's character development that includes the divorce gave me the impression that she just wants to spend time with Ryan, which pretty much sums up onto why Ryan has been being taken care of by her mother, which includes Bobby, in Royal Woods before they moved back into Great Lake City. I mean, granted, they didn't live in Great Lake City completely, from what I've learned, but at the same time, it really feels like that Maria wanted to spend her time at Royal Woods than in the big city. Then again, a town is a lot less stressful compared to living in an apartment in the big city. Like, I'm always convinced that Great Lake City is supposed to be this show's, or the Casagrandes show's, version of New York City. Like, I'm supposed to understand that Royal Woods is supposed to be a normal town in Michigan. And granted that Michigan may be a place of small towns, it honestly feels a lot more odd to think that Great Lake City is the city of all cities in this show and the Casagrandes. But that's just me though. Since that the Casagrandes Christmas tradition is a lot more different compared to the Loud House's family traditions, it really feels like the only objective that Ryan has, unlike Lincoln, is to find her father. Since that her father spent the majority of his time in the store because of a huge accident. Granted, I can understand that the accident is supposed to be humorous, but considering that he doesn't do anything other than being stuck in a fountain, then it's honestly somewhat of a downgrade of what I imagine of what his character would have done in a Christmas episode. But once everyone saves Ryan, Bobby, and their father from getting snowed in inside the grocery store, this leads to Bobby saying, and for me personally, with everyone holding lanterns for their way to celebrate Christmas the Casagrandes way, it made me appreciate this episode a lot more, since that even though it takes elements from Levin Loud's Leapin, it doesn't change the fact that it doesn't have a character like Mr. Grouse. It's honestly sad, like really, really sad, to think that the Casagrandes can make a really good Christmas episode on its own without relying on making it similar to the Loud House, despite with similar similarities, is further proof of the fact that the Halloween episode wasn't as good as I remember it. And believe me, as much as I understand that if you like the Halloween episode, that's fine, but at the same time, you can't even make the argument that it's better than Tricked. I'm just being honest with you. Just because it's a Halloween episode doesn't mean it's good. In order to be a good holiday episode, the execution of the story and characters need to be intact. Granted, you're not going to be seeing mistletoe kisses whatsoever, especially for people who want to see a kiss of Ryan's parents on the cheek, but at the same time, it's not the end of the world. As a matter of fact, it really feels like that you're probably expecting a lot more involving the Casagrandes, and even though you may have points on trying to make the episode much more better, just because they're not included doesn't mean that it's a downgrade. Besides, the ending of the Loud House when it comes to the singing, the reveal of the parents, everyone getting their items back, Lori kissing Clyde, along with Christmas morning while Bobby is Lori's Christmas present, which, to be honest with you, it's actually humorous. Lincoln accidentally destroying Mr. Grouse's window with his sled from Mr. Grouse, which it proves to me that everything can't be able to move on afterwards all the time. With Luann finishing her 12 Punts of Christmas and Lana capturing her thinking that she's a deal. I have to admit, it's a great way to wrap up this episode, even though that Lana doesn't realize that Luann isn't a deal and just wearing antlers. So, what does the Casagrandes Christmas episode ends? A huge family get-together at the Casagrandes apartment. For me personally, it's really impressive to think that they managed to cram in so many characters, and you can instantly tell that if you're a fan of the Casagrandes, they really did a good job on trying to have everyone completely happy, especially the ones that you're highly familiar with. Not to mention that it also includes the Lau family being part of it, due to them picking up Lori from the university, Van Zilla broke down, and they have no other option but to be part of the Christmas celebration of the Casagrandes. You know, after witnessing that this was one of the final bits of the episode, it just screams Christmas crossover between the Lau House and the Casagrandes in the future. Since that the Casagrandes came to an end, it just screams crossover material, because I know full well that it will probably be a really good crossover. I mean, granted, I'm not sure if it's going to happen in the future, especially next year, but at the same time, the only thing I can pray is that if it does happen, it has to be good and not terrible. So after critiquing everything from both Christmas episodes, which episode is superior? The Lau House's 11 Louds of Leapin, or the Casagrandes' A Very Casagrande Christmas? Well, as much as I really appreciate the Casagrandes' originality when it comes to its Christmas episodes, it doesn't change the fact that 11 Louds of Leapin is a really superior Christmas episode for how much effort it put in. I mean, for me personally, episodes like this get overshadowed by the bad episodes, and I can totally understand that people don't usually talk about this episode due to the terribleness of future episodes that came afterwards. And while the Casagrandes wouldn't be a thing without the Lau House, I'm pretty sure that the episode itself is great for what it is, but at the same time, it's never going to top the Lau House's Christmas episode. I appreciate the effort and admission that they did, especially with the final minutes, but at the same time, even with that, it's never going to top the final minutes of 11 Louds of Leapin. For anyone who watched that show back when it aired in 2016. Like, the saddest thing about the Casagrandes, especially when it comes to this episode, is that there's not going to be a lot of people, mainly ex-fans of the Lau House, will watch it. Because at the same time, it's mostly the Lau House's decline of what causes so many fans to quit the show and do different things, like watching other shows, for example. Like, I would really try to look at this episode as a good episode, especially for fans who still stayed with the series, but you need to keep in mind when it comes to ex-fans, they're the ones that are highly familiar with the show, and when people are highly familiar with the first three seasons and realize that as the series progressed, it just got worse, the credibility got sucked out. Granted, I understand that the Casagrandes have other issues on its own, but the way I see it, it really feels like that this show wouldn't get the attention that it deserves due to the Lau House's decline. Now look, if you're not interested in the Casagrandes because it's not appealing to you, that's fine. I totally understand that you don't want to watch a lot of cartoons like I do, but the thing is, I honestly felt like that if I was a fan back in 2016 and I gave up on the show, I wouldn't give the Casagrandes a chance. And being a fan since last year took me this long to admire the credibility involving the Casagrandes is something that I don't think anyone would do if they're ex-fans. So it's honestly a shame that people are going to tune into the Lau House if they're new, and if they see the issues like everyone else as the series progressed, they would not tune in to the Casagrandes. I mean, granted, it's not that big of a deal considering that the Casagrandes is officially over, but still, that doesn't automatically mean that the Casagrandes should be overshadowed. Like, I can totally understand the good episodes being overshadowed by the negative episodes, but when it comes to the Lighthouse's decline, the Casagrandes is a completely different story, and it's not even part of the Lighthouse's decline, not even a bit. So with that being said, I give 11 Louds of Leapin a 9.5 out of 10, and as for A Very Casagrandes Christmas, a 9 out of 10. It's really rare for a spin-off material like this to have this high of a rating, and believe me when I say this, you will go mentally insane to find at least one spin-off material to have a 9 out of 10 or even higher, because you know it's really rare to come across, and this episode is one of them. Before we wrap up this video, I'm just going to say that after the possible romance ranking episode, I'm probably not going to be doing any more Lighthouse vs. Casagrandes videos anytime soon. I mean, they're all ideals, despite the fact that the romance episodes might subtract those ideals. I still need to come up with ideals involving the character development videos. After making the Lincoln Loud video, I really need to put my attention on the other characters for a change. Granted, it won't be as big compared to the Lincoln Loud video, but at the same time, I need to put my perspective on the character developments on the Loud family real soon. It may take time, but at the same time, it will be worth it. I'm Lonely Fanboy 4 here, and I'll see you guys next time.